Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the cottage on this extremely windy day. I've got the dog bowl filled up with fresh water. Hopefully we won't have issues today in your hearing us, because I don't even know what the wind gusts have been. Very windy. It's nothing compared to what it was last night, though. It was scary around here. The tornado alarms went off. We were under a tornado warning for I don't know how long. We got lots of hail. Stuart said he got hail at his house. Kayla said she's got wind damage on her roof. So it's just, the weather has just been wild, and we had torrential rain as evidenced by all of the gravel everywhere. And I anticipate the humidity will be exceptional today since it's supposed to get up to around 90. But despite that, we have lots of stuff on slate for you today. We're going to talk to a certified tree arborist who is going to inform us on feeding, watering, pruning, and tending our trees in general, and some of the best selections for trees here in Oklahoma. We're going to talk a little bit about saving foxglove seeds, what's going on in the garden. Well, what do you say, Stuart?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, I'm so excited about today's segment. I've been promising it to you for quite a while. Dave, the certified arborist, is here with Kayla to talk all things trees, tree maintenance, tree selection, tree pruning, tree fertilizing, tree watering. Have I missed anything?
Nope, tree care and just general overall what needs to be done on your trees year round.
Okay, so if you are a tree hugger like we are, then you are definitely you are going to want to maybe even take some tips, take some notes, because we have got you covered. Now, it's a very windy day.
It is.
We're going to try to talk loudly
Yes.
enough that you can hear us. Kayla is not mic'd, just FYI, right. Kayla, talk loudly. But I think it's really important, first of all, when you have anyone that's going to be working on your trees, to find someone that you trust.
Right.
And Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company and your certification.
So my company is Johnson's Tree and Crane. We specialize in tree removal, tree trimming, tree pruning, and a lot of your hazardous removals, and then we do a lot of the chemical injection side. We do disease and insect mitigation. We do a lot of fungus control and deep root feeding and things of that nature.
Yeah, and it's all about, I think that's very important. Let's talk about that from the very beginning. You're not doing the superficial kind of stuff where for the most part you are just spraying the foliage of the plant. No. You are really doing deep root treatment,
right.
And you really inject a lot of the necessary chemicals into the ground at the root zone, which is exactly where they need to be.
Correct.
Okay, so let's start out with probably question number one, and that is tree selection. So what trees are good for Oklahoma if you're going to plant an investment tree, a large tree that would be good for Oklahoma, the Southwest in general, maybe even America overall?
So in Oklahoma, you're going to have different areas that trees do better in.
Okay.
So in the downtown area, there's a lot of sycamores, there's a lot of oaks, there's a lot of elm trees, and Chinese pistache, lace bark elm, stuff like that. So it depends on the styling that you want. When you do that, it's all about placement, where you place it in your yard, the amount of, how the contour of the ground is lined out, how the grade is, what kind of water it's going to get. Your soil conditions are important.
How close it is to pavement.
How close it is to standing structures, your house. You don't want to have foundation issues. You don't want to have concrete problems. You don't want to have plumbing problems with the root structures. So there's a lot of things that go into play when selecting the right tree for your house. The other thing is how much water it's going to get. Is it near grass that's getting fertilized often? Are there problems with, city runoff, city sewage? There's so many different things that can go into play.
So it's site specific.
Correct.
And you can always contact an arborist. You can contact the Oklahoma Horticultural Extension Center. And it's good to have as much information as possible when you are asking for recommendations, answering those very questions that you just addressed. Now, I know for me, when I think about an investment tree, I'm typically thinking, at least in Oklahoma, I always go to oaks. oaks and some of the Dutch elm resistant elms.
Right.
And for me, I'm a huge fan of Shumard and Nuttall oaks. These are Nuttall oaks that are planted here. These were not here when we moved in. At one time, something else was here, probably a Dutch elm, that succumbed many, many years ago. And I selected this Nuttall oak. It was named after Thomas Nuttall, the famous botanist, and I've had very good luck with them.
They're great trees. They're pretty disease resilient. A lot of your oaks in Oklahoma, so Oklahoma has one of the largest problems with canker. These are going to be more canker resilient than most. Your white oaks, your red oaks, all of those, Shumards, you know, they really struggle a lot with it.
Okay, so briefly, and let's put up a definition right here on the screen, Stuart, a definition of what canker is.
So canker is an airborne fungus that grows primarily on oak trees. It starts on the exterior layer of the tree, and then eventually, in easier terms, it turns the tree into a sponge and rots and kills it.
Okay.
So it suffocates it from the outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what makes a tree prone to canker?
You know, there's a lot of different things. Having a weak immunity, the tree being weak and not healthy.
Overwatering?
Maybe. I mean, if you have a lot of cedar trees on your property, you can normally almost guarantee yourself that if you have a lot of cedars, you're going to have a lot of disease.
Oh, that's scary.
Because they're the Earth's filters. They catch everything that blows in the air. So if it's an airborne fungus or it's anything like that.
Okay. So that would tell us that air circulation is
key.
very important.
Correct.
Okay, so these are beautiful Nuttall oaks that Kayla planted last year. She shared with us the brilliant planting tip of planting the trees in a square hole rather than a round one, so that the roots are not tempted to grow in a circle, but really start to find their way into the surrounding area. Talk to me a little bit about feeding and long-term care of these.
So
now,
typically, whenever they're small like this, it's always, how I do it is we go in and we trim it and set the future growth pattern. So however we want that tree to look and how we want it to grow is how we're going to trim it. Get the weight distribution correct.
And I love that. I don't think we can emphasize that enough.
Yes.
It's like your children. Train them in the way they shall grow.
Right. So the goal is to come in, and anything that the tree does not need to feed that's necessary, that anything that you leave on there, all of the water growth, all the little limbs, they're going to rob what the tree could be feeding to rest on its own. So the less it has to feed, the healthier it's going to be on smaller trees and oak trees and things like this. So, I mean, you come in, anything growing down towards the ground is always going to grow down towards the ground. So you don't want anything growing down. You don't want anything that's really majorly crossing. You know, it's always good to go in and trim all the dead out of them.
And I love the way this exposes the architecture and the branching.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's also, by trimming these that grow down, you are simultaneously elevating the canopy, which will benefit the turf below it. It instantly makes the tree look a little bit more mature, I think.
It does, and it's super healthy for it. I mean, a lot of people you hear people say, well, I don't want to take too much off.
I would take that one off there. Would that be a bad idea?
You're like the audience member.
Since it's kind of crossing there, but I don't know. You're the expert.
You know, Linda, another good thing about what he's doing, you're not just kind of getting the dead off and raising the canopy on it. He's thinning it out.
Yeah.
You're on a corner. You catch a lot of wind, right? We've had several conversations when we're on properties looking at trees about that tree got tore up because the wind got caught up in it.
Yeah,
right?
It gets this cyclonic effect inside the canopy.
With our high wind gusts and our ice storms and all of the rain and the hail and the crazy weather that we get, the less things for wind to catch on, the better.
And ice.
And ice, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, immediately it already looks better. It makes wonderful shade patterns. It creates better air circulation up and down the street, but also up into my flower beds,
Removing these dead
which
branches.
is important.
Anything dead or weak is subject to getting sick, just like we are. If we have a weak immune system, we're going to catch something.
Okay.
Same with the trees. So anything dead, that's subject to catch disease and fungus, and that will transfer it into the rest of the tree.
It also helps to be tall.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So when is the best time to prune our trees?
You know, it really depends on the type of trees. It depends on what type of trim you're doing. I like to do everything when the trees are dormant. But that being said, if you use pruning sealer, if you trim them correctly, if you don't take out more than the tree will allow you to take out, if you're
using sharp pruners.
Yeah, and cleaning your equipment. You know, a lot of people hire tree trimmers that a lot of people always think it's best to go with the cheapest, but you really need somebody that's going to clean their gaps if they're gonna, you know, if they're taking out a tree that's dead, right?
Right.
And you've got a hazardous tree that for some reason you can't just free climb with a rope or something like that. You need to be able to, you know, the saws need to be clean so you don't transfer disease. It's just like if she's sick and I go hang out with her, and then I come over and talk to you and she's got the flu, then you're going to catch it.
Yeah.
Trees are the same way.
They're very, very contagious.
Yes.
Well, I love the fact that you are like me, and if you've got a set of pruners in your hand, you cannot resist. It's very, very gratifying.
Yeah.
It's very gratifying. Okay, let's go over to my other tree because I want it to look fairly symmetrical.
Absolutely.
And Stuart, let's speed this section up while Dave kind of does some pruning on this tree after he finishes that one. Because I love the fact that I can see this work getting done before my very eyes. So we planted both of these from a design standpoint to flank either side of the walkway going up to the cottage. These will get large over time. They will be great shade trees, which is a gift not only to me, but to any passersby. They are beautiful and they give that beautiful tree-lined street effect that is one of the reasons people love to live in these old neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
So by law, for a long time, I was in the power space clearing business and communication space clearing business.
It's like a contract with OG&E kind of thing, right?
It is, and so what they have to do is they have to get everything away from the power line that can damage the power, put it out. You know, typically the rule is 10 feet from both sides of the line. From the line out 10 feet or 15 feet. It depends on which power company you're working for. I did a lot of work for Duncan Power and Electric. I did a lot of work all over Oklahoma in the power space and communication space, and you know.
What are the rights of the homeowner in that regard?
Well, some
You know,
usually seen that
here's the
by
whole
gun out,
thing.
chasing out of the backyard.
They have an easement.
And
And regardless of where you think yours is or where your fence is, there's still an easement.
Yeah.
And because that it is state property, the power lines and their state properties, they have to do whatever they can to protect those properties.
do they,
I feel like it'd be polite to just let them know, though.
Oh, absolutely.
and what about their responsibilities to the health of the trees? Because so many of the
They don't
trees
have
just
any.
get topped. They
They do
don't.
not have any.
They have no-
chunk it,
none.
right?
No.
need
They
to
don't
go,
care.
And the rest of it, from
They don't
my
have
vision,
any, and it does not matter.
It doesn't even look like they cut it till you go out and look up into them and you see how hollowed out it is.
Yeah, they don't really have any type of responsibility, and they use a lot of commercial growth restrictors. So tree growth regulators. So every time you're driving down an easement or you see little silver tags, it'll say TGR, tree growth regulation. It'll have a number on those little silver tags, and it will tell you how fast that tree is growing versus what they've injected it with or sprayed it with or applied.
Oh gosh.
Yep.
Now I notice you're also kind of doing some tip pruning, and is that to maintain this kind of
Yeah,
conical
I don't want
shape?
it to grow all wonky and be crazy looking, so what I'm doing is,
Trying to
and
make...
I'm also getting the weight off the ends of them so that
Okay.
they're not so end heavy, because on new trees like this, they can typically get too, long, and they'll start drooping, and then that affects the whole growth of the entire branch. Instead of it growing up and out and getting big in diameter, it's going to get long, skinny, and start to droop, and then you're going to permanently have that issue here at the base of the tree.
And also, I think it makes it that much more vulnerable for ice,
It does, yes.
particularly in Oklahoma, where we sometimes have storms, ice storms that come through before the leaves have even dropped the trees have even dropped their leaves.
Right. That is correct.
But they're definitely looking better already.
And as they mature and grow, you can take more and more and more. Look at that, that was cool. A little butterfly.
The other thing is I notice you continually walk 360 around the tree.
Yeah, you have to. You can't stand in one spot. You cannot stand in one spot.
It's very satisfying.
It is satisfying.
It's all bonsai.
After doing it for going on 15 years, I still don't get tired of doing it. Every time
That's pretty cool.
it's always something new.
Well, you're not only a certified arborist, you are a certified tree hugger.
I am, yes.
Well, that's wonderful. We will let you finish this up, and then we'll move up to my holly hedge. We'll talk a little bit about that,
Okay.
how you fertilize, how you treat disease,
Yep.
and what problems we should be on the lookout for. Now, another thing that I think is important to consult an arborist for is when you make, again, I call these investment plantings. So we put in some really large Nellie Stevens hollies to give me some protection from the wind, to give me a little bit of privacy, and to have a beautiful evergreen backdrop for all of the perennials in bloom. So we transplanted a Nellie Stevens holly that was planted too close to the windows. And Stuart, here, if we can find it, we might put in a picture of where it was. It is the middle one over here. It's a little bit shorter than the others. And then Kayla came in and installed 3 more large Nellie Stevens hollies, and I have a couple of Oakland hollies there as well. Now, overall, I would say they have just done brilliantly, but at the beginning of the season, I noticed some of the leaves were yellowing and they became spotted with what I now think of as bee poop fungus. So, number one, what is that?
So typically we get it from red wasp bees. They can land on things and carry disease and spotting and things like that to other trees. Same with your Bradford pears, things like that. One of the main problems that we have is when people put in beautiful landscapes and spend a lot of money doing so, they don't think about the dirt that has been there forever. So when you have your house built, they cut a pad, they bring in fill dirt, and then when you have it landscaped, they bring in topsoil, rich mixed topsoil, whatever it may be. Over time, we take care of our beds. So when the leaves fall off, when everything falls back into the ground, we're raking it up, cleaning it up. That's that plant or that tree's natural job, is when it drops leaves and it disperses of things, it's supposed to decompose. And then when it decomposes, it puts all of those nutrients and everything back into the soil. Well, because we like it to look good, we clean it up and it doesn't ever get replenished.
However, if the foliage is diseased, We
Right.
want to clean it up.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay.
And we want to clean it up either way. But what that does is then you have soil that the plants, the trees, the bushes, the flowers, everything has sucked all of the nutrients out of that soil that is available. So what we do is we come in and we do a deep root injection, and we feed and replenish that soil with the magnesium, the iron, the zinc, everything that it has used up and is lacking, we put back into the soil. And that, a lot of the time,
The microbes, the enzymes,
everything,
all of that.
everything, yes.
Okay, so
Iron, one of my favorite things, which is readily available for most people to go buy themselves, is called Super Thrive. It's available at, TLC, Site One, places like that.
okay. And I have used it.
Amazon.
Amazon. I've
Yeah,
used it
Amazon,
I've used it
absolutely.
for years. Actually, they reached out to me a number of years ago about using Super Thrive.
Yeah.
And I have used it, though I have never used it in a deep root injection before. But boy, did these respond. Almost immediately,
Absolutely.
the yellowing went away,
Yes.
the bee poop.
Yes.
What is that exactly?
So red wasps can transfer fungus from trees to trees, and they can also cause spotting on a lot of your nellies, your yopons, things like that. It's a bacteria that grows on the rear end of a wasp, and they can transfer it from plant to plant.
Or a bee? You said it was bees.
and
but-
oak trees are,
okay.
are very
Susceptible.
susceptible to it as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, certainly, by injecting that Super Thrive, it really helped mitigate a lot of those problems. But I would say I garden 95% organically, but periodically, if I'm going to lose something that might be an investment planting, I might bring out something that is synthetic if I'm concerned about them and I really want them to be there for the long haul. So you also applied something
insecticide,
for the bees,
yes.
an insecticide, a systemic insecticide.
Right, a systemic insecticide called Imajet.
Okay.
It's an arbor jet chemical, and it typically, depending on the growth pattern and the size of the tree, that Imajet injection should last and carry up to 2 to 4 years, depending on the growth
Wow.
of the tree.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Kayla was pointing out that when she comes in, sometimes for your client, you'll see a problem and you may spray for it organically or not. A lot of times, sometimes not. And it may last 3 months, and then you have to do it again, you have to do it again. Better to come in with an organic measure and also a very efficacious measure
Right.
that is injected right at the root zone that you don't have to do again, hopefully for another 4 years.
Absolutely, and one of the main things is, we do spray. We spray for powdery mildew. We spray a lot of copper fungicide. We spray a lot of,
Scale.
topical applications that we can use on your flower beds that are safe. The one thing I would say is the most common is people overwatering everything.
Okay, well, let's take a break here.
Yeah.
And now that we've talked about fertilizing, and by the way, he also fertilized my Yopon hollies, which were showing a little bit of yellowing, a little bit of sign of distress. And let's take a break here, and when we come back, let's talk about good watering practices, and then I think we can wrap it up.
Fantastic.
Okay, just a couple more questions about pruning before we move on to watering. So we were able to go ahead and prune those hardwood oaks, but when it came up to the prospect of pruning the October October Glory maple, excuse me, and also my Yopons, you said it was hands off, and because.
So this tree being young and being newly planted, whenever these trees get trimmed, they bleed a lot of sap, and the sap helps to wash away bacteria and fungus. That's what the tree does in protection of itself. Just like when you get a cut and your body puts out plasma.
Right.
When you get a cut, it's the same thing with the tree.
Okay.
Maple trees grow extremely fast, and it's best to not touch them and let them get to the size you would like them to be as far as diameter, trunk size, the caliper if it's a 4, 6, 8, 10, 12-inch tree.
Okay.
But they will grow extremely fast, and unless it needs to be trimmed for some reason, leave it alone and let it do its thing.
So that said, this is in a flower bed, but let's say this was in my landscape and I needed to mow underneath it. Could I safely remove just some of the lower ones?
This time of year.
You could, yes, you could, but I mean,
But be very
it
conservative.
would, yes, and if you could, just weed eat, you know.
Okay, yeah, okay. So the other thing is, speaking of weed eaters, one,
Do not hit your trees with it.
do not hit your trees with a weed eater. My son has established that. He was asking me, what's up with this? And I said, that looks like you've been weeding it with your weed eater, which is one of the reasons I like to have big wells around my trees. The Yopon hollows, you also said can be, I think of them as a very tough plant, but initially you said they can be a little bit finicky. Let them keep as much of their foliage to photosynthesize and feed their establishment as possible
Correct.
before I do anything major. But it is fair to say that at any point in time, you can cut dead wood out of your tree.
Absolutely.
At any point in time,
Anytime.
and it's also the safe thing to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about watering. Now the oak trees are on the street side of my sidewalk. That area is not irrigated, and they seem to be doing just fine. We have not had a drought for the past couple of years. We've had for Oklahoma fairly regular rainfall, and certainly recently we have had a lot of rain. Now this is in a bed that we made sure at its planting it would be something on a slope so it would have pretty good drainage because it does have a drip system attached to it. So let's talk a little bit about watering practices, and primarily the biggest nemesis of watering and that is overwatering trees when they are in the context of a lawn, and particularly a fescue lawn. Can you address that?
So if you overwater, there are many things it can cause. It can cause the tree to not be able to shed the water fast enough. It can cause root rot. You know, another thing is what it does is it makes all of the dirt around the tree weak. So I typically, when I've been in Tulsa on storms in Oklahoma City and Nichols Hills and all these places, a lot of people overwater. All of that around the tree becomes weak, and we get high winds, and you see these giant trees that have been uprooted.
Right.
And the ground is just saturated wet, and that's from overwatering. Fertilizing, you can burn the trees badly when you fertilize if not applied correctly. You can burn up the feeder roots. You can burn up
well, any of the, I think the tender
yeah.
little capillary roots that come off of the major roots, I think, could be compromised
Right.
if you feed. So a tree like this is about a year old. We have not fertilized
And
this
it's
tree.
in a perfect area.
And yes,
It
and
gets
we
perfect drainage.
right.
You don't have it sitting down in a hole where it can become susceptible to dying of overwatering. It's
Right.
got good drainage.
And it was not planted too deeply,
Correct.
which is sometimes a
And that's
problem.
super. The planting stage of the tree is the tree's most important stage of its entire life.
Yes, and I would say in that regard, I would say a lot of times I see trees that they're growing in a circle.
Right.
They
The root structures.
The root structures
Right.
become root bound. They didn't remove one of the containment elements. Sometimes it could be a wire, it could be
The
burlap, it
cage,
could
the
be
burlap
the cage.
sack, yeah.
Sometimes you'll see plastic sticking up,
And you always hear people say, well, it's okay to plant it with the cage, or it's okay to do this, that, and the other. And it's not, because it causes root girdling, or
I mean, would you want to be planted in a cage?
No.
I don't think I would want to be
Uh-uh.
planted in a cage. So how long before I would fertilize this tree?
deep root.
Deep root, until it looked
So
like
you
it
could
needed
use
it?
a lot of like root starters. But as far as doing a pretty intense fertilization, I would wait until the second year.
Okay. Or maybe after a tree has really been damaged by a storm and it
Yeah.
needs to regenerate.
Absolutely.
It needs to regenerate itself. Well, that's really, really crucial information. So This time of year, we're getting regular rainfall.
Yes.
I haven't turned on my sprinkler system for I don't know how long.
And it's a good idea not to.
Yeah,
Because if it's raining and the earth is doing its job, we don't need to take its
Right.
place.
And the trees obviously are not distressed. So let's end on this note. What if it's August? Mother Nature has cut off the tap. The tree is looking very stressed, and a sign of that is it's starting to
Then you
drop
can't
some
give
of
it
its
enough water.
leaves. Then you can't give it enough water.
Yeah.
So, and you can't give it enough water at the root zone.
Correct.
So put a slow drip hose on it
Absolutely.
overnight,
Yep.
keep moving it around the perimeter of
Yep.
the tree, and do it to all of your trees and really any of your investment
Anything,
plantings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
kind
you.
sir, for your
Yes,
expertise.
ma'am. Absolutely.
One last question, because I'm going to retain your services. I have a great big old limb that is hanging over the roof of my house from a neighbor's
Okay.
tree. I don't want it to damage my roof,
Your
and I need you
shingles
to
and everything,
yeah,
absolutely.
I need you to come back and remove
Yeah.
that. And legally, as a homeowner, I can do that.
If it is impeding on any of your structures, or it is over your property line, or it is putting anything on your property at risk, you do have
The right to
the
do it.
right to
Yeah.
do whatever
And
you
of,
want to do.
and of course, be a good neighbor.
Oh, absolutely.
Talk to your
Don't
neighbors
just go
about
cutting
it.
it off.
Don't just go cutting it off.
Yeah.
Also, equally as importantly, be a good neighbor, but also be a good steward of your trees.
Absolutely.
Practice best pruning practices, whether it's on a very limited basis, like what we have done to these new trees here, or major pruning on established
And
trees.
always use your pruning sealers.
And always use prune. Okay.
Yep,
Okay. Do we need to
absolutely.
talk
On
about
on
because I've
big
heard not
cuts.
to use pruning sealers.
It's a big deal. And
It's
it
a
depends
slippery
on-
slope,
yes,
but
it
if you're
depends on
going
who
to
you
remove
talk
any
to.
limb bigger than 4 inches in diameter,
The current thinking is to use a pruning.
I have always
sealer.
done it.
Okay.
I've always practiced using it.
Okay.
And I can send you evidence of why you need to use it.
Okay. So I had intended to end it there, but then there's always so much more to talk about. Do your due diligence, do your research, talk to a certified arborist. And by the way, folks, this information is constantly changing. Trees that used to be on the recommended plant list for
Are not.
Oklahoma are not anymore because the conditions in Oklahoma are changing. I bet they're changing in your area too. So do your research, do your due diligence, and know what you are doing before you go out and tend your trees.